At Talus, we know cybersecurity can be tough and you can't protect everything, but with Talus, you can secure what matters most. With Talus industry-leading platforms, you can protect critical applications, data, and identities, anywhere and at scale with the highest ROI. That's why the most trusted brands and largest banks, retailers, and healthcare companies in the world rely on Talus to protect what matters most. Applications, data, and identities. That's Talus, T-H-A-L-E-S. Learn more at talusgroup.com/cyber.
New Vitamin Water Zero Sugar Pineapple Passion Fruit is packed with vitamins. Just like the amount of peas we packed in that sentence. It's packed like your tote bag. The one you stole from your ex. Or your overpriced half a studio apartment. Or extra rushed rush hour traffic. Packed like your calendar. Triple booked at 5, of course. Grab a Vitamin Water. Did we mention it's packed with vitamins?
Hey guys, and welcome to the podcast. I'm really delighted about today's guest. For the audience, the doctors, the dentists, the high-income professionals. I have Wallis Tsai. She is based out of New York City, and she's actually a Wellesley alum, and she's going to talk to the audience about life, disability, and LTC insurance planning. She's going to talk about why doctors and a lot of finance professionals are the targets of bad financial advice and what she does to help clients solve it. So I'm really happy about the discussions. Wallis, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. And briefly, I know your background, but introduce yourself to the audience and we'll dive into the questions.
Yeah, sure thing. So I grew up outside of Cleveland, Ohio. And as you mentioned, I went to Wellesley College. And then my first job out of college was actually teaching English in China for a year on a fellowship. But then I entered the finance industry in 2002 full-time at Goldman Sachs. And I spent hours upon hours in Excel spreadsheets. And that was where I developed my passion for quantitative analysis, an enduring love of spreadsheets, and grinding out those very long weeks. I really learned a lot about the financial services industry because I was an investment banker and then a hedge fund investor covering banks and insurance companies and asset managers. And so from learning the ins and outs of how these businesses operate, I started to see how often they were not delivering great outcomes for consumers. And then friends and colleagues would ask for advice. And oftentimes I was struck by just how hard it was to navigate successfully if you didn't have the benefit of the professional training that I had. And I just didn't think that was right. Like you shouldn't need a decade of professional training to be a customer.
Yeah, and it's a really great segue into what we're talking about. So what is the number one problem or solution that you help clients with, and who are they?
Sure thing. So we work in life insurance, disability insurance, and long-term care insurance. And we help clients make a plan that's aligned with their own goals that helps them enjoy and spend more of their own money in the future and really sets themselves and their loved ones up to have a comfortable, happy life experience, even if life throws some curveballs. So there's a risk management component, and then there's also a tax-efficient investing and legacy planning component.
Yeah. And so the next question I have for you is, we were talking about this in the green room. You talk about doctors and finance professionals being the number one target of bad advice. Is it the industry or is it just their lack of knowledge? And what can listeners on the show do to help solve before coming to work with you?
Yeah, sure thing. So my experience has been that oftentimes doctors are the recipients of some pretty bad financial advice. And yeah, I have loved ones and family members who are doctors. And so between like my professional experience and my family experience, I've developed this hypothesis, which I'd be curious about your opinion about. Doctors are broadly like a smart group of people, right? You don't get to be a doctor because you're like not a smart person. And I think especially for people who are used to being high achieving and feeling smart in the world, it can be especially uncomfortable to feel confused, right? No human enjoys feeling confused, but especially I think for people who aren't used to it, it's uncommonly uncomfortable. And so I think that can sometimes lead to a reluctance to ask the right questions or to trust their own judgments about what does or does not make sense. and maybe get pushed around or do something because you think it's what you're supposed to be doing. And it can often just go very badly. And I think on a related note, finance executives tend to also be a group of people who did well generally, were smart folks. And I think, especially because they have some adjacent subject matter expertise, it can be sometimes hard for them to identify what they don't know, or feel comfortable asking questions, because none of us like to look dumb. And sometimes asking a question leads to this uncomfortable moment where you worry that could happen. And that's often the root of really bad financial decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I think I had another guest on the podcast, and I frequently have lunch with my colleagues and friends, and we talk about, because we have doctor clients, and how a lot of the doctors as a general are very high maintenance, and they're some of the most challenging clients just because of what you just discussed. What's interesting is, so they come to you for life, disability, and long-term care. What should people be considering? Who needs it? Does everybody need these insurance? And what should people be aware of and looking out for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say that almost everybody needs some subset of the types of insurance policies that we work with. And I'll share with you the broad buckets that we think about in terms of, to help your listeners hopefully think about what they might want to review for themselves. But broadly, I think of there as being two categories. One is making sure that you and your loved ones have a bulletproof setup in the event that life throws you some sort of curveball. And oftentimes that curveball takes the form of a health issue, which obviously from a professional side, your audience sees a ton of, right? Like when somebody gets a difficult diagnosis or an accident that disrupts things. And we want to make sure that the clients are set up where they and their loved ones would still be able to live something close to the life they were aiming for, even if those future paychecks stopped. And so that's where things like disability insurance and life insurance come into play. Now, there's also a second bucket where, for folks who are in the position, like a lot of your audience members are, where they are able to save meaningful amounts of money and they're interested in growing that money and having more of it to spend and enjoy in the future. And we all have dreams about what life might look like 10, 20, 30 plus years from now. And there are appropriate uses of permanent life insurance. So things that sometimes get a bad rap online, like whole life insurance, variable life insurance, when used correctly in a facts-based and discerning way, those can actually be really great tools. But the trick is to have a framework for evaluating whether using those actually makes sense for a given person or family or not. And similar to medical advice, there are a lot of things that would be like great advice for one group of patients, but maybe totally inappropriate advice for another group. It's the same with insurance, where there's advice that would be great for some folks, terrible for others. But there are some universal principles, right? Like everyone would benefit from just reflecting on, if I got seriously ill or injured, or another earner in my family did, or a care provider in my family did, would life be okay from a financial perspective, right? That's just a universal principle that I think everyone will end up being happier down the road if they take a moment to think about and act on that.
Yeah, that's a great response. And the next question I have for you is, the first question is, does the audience need either life or disability, long-term care? The second question is, once you decide which where to allocate in each of these buckets, how much should be people considering, and what are the factors to consider in determining how much insurance you need?
Yeah, that's a really big, excellent question. And I'll try to break it down into like pieces that hopefully resonate with like different people at different phases of their career and their lives. But I would say that anybody who's generating income definitely needs to check in on their disability insurance situation. And we offer a free evaluation of workplace plans. And I actually find that doctors do a really good job, better than most other professions, of having at least something meaningful in place. I think that's probably related to the popularity of the getting it during residency, or just making sure that you're covered from the start. And that's fantastic, right? That totally makes sense. But making sure that you check in and update as needed is important. Now, if you have other people in your life who depend on your income, or importantly, the care you provide for free, that's a really strong signal that life insurance is necessary as well. And then when you get into the more like sophisticated planning strategies around retirement savings or crafting a legacy that you want to leave to your children or grandchildren or organizations you care about, that's usually a life insurance strategy, but for permanent life insurance, right? So not temporary like term, but rather permanent like whole or variable life insurance. And I can talk a little more about how we can tell the difference between when that's a smart idea versus when it's an expensive mistake. But I'll just answer your question about long-term care first, which is that long-term care can be a really great tool for a couple things. And I think for your audience, probably there are a lot of people who feel like, I've worked and saved. I can handle that if it comes up for me down the road. It's okay. And I'd offer a couple thoughts on that. One is that you might want to just check in on a facility that's actually the type of place you'd be excited to go to and just test your assumptions about what it really costs, because it is shocking. Like I was looking into some places for some loved ones recently, and it was like $25K a month and above for a nice place in Manhattan. And so just update your assumption. But then also secondarily, long-term care insurance can function for your adult children as a prepaid buffet ticket where it's like, hey, and this is how I envision it for my own children. I want them to feel like mom already took care of this plan. And if she needs a bunch of care and support, we need to go redeem this ticket with the insurance company, and a big like tsunami of money just gets unleashed, right, to throw at this problem. And I don't want them to feel like the money that's spent on me in that scenario is competitive with any sort of legacy that I might leave to them or my grandchildren. And it can also be useful for smoothing over relations between adult siblings that have to make decisions about mom and dad's care. Because if you feel like you're just punching a prepaid ticket and then somebody else's money is helping you address this health crisis that your parent is experiencing, that just leads to a much more peaceful and easy life experience for the grown-up children who are helping mom and dad. So those are like things to think about when considering like life, disability, and long-term care. But I'll pause there because I know it was a big question with a lot of aspects of the answer.
No, that's a good segue. And because you also alluded to whole life and variable life. And so what factors should one consider when looking at these? Because I know it's quite common. They're quite popular and you hear these terms. But what should people be on the lookout for? And are these products a good fit for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a ton of online content on these topics too, right? And oftentimes it's like very strongly opinionated one way or the other. And that's interesting to me because, again, like the advice is right for some people in some situations and wrong for some people in other situations. And I really like to run evaluations such that you get a facts-based answer that is immune to anyone's like hopes or biases about what the outcome might be, right? You want to get like a proper test done, like as objective as possible. And so that's how we do it for clients. But the way that we think about permanent life insurance at a high level is that if term doesn't meet your needs, right? If your need for insurance is not temporary and you want to own a policy that lasts your entire life, then it's worth exploring permanent. And permanent is a category that includes several different variations of insurance. So if you think of permanent insurance as being akin to saying ice cream, then whole life might be mint chocolate chip, variable life might be strawberry, and they're the same category, but can be pretty different. And so when we look at this for clients, one of the things we help them uncover in their dialogue with us is, what do they want from the policy that they own? Because if I'm working with somebody who tells me, oh, I am long-term bullish on the equity markets, and over the next 30 to 50 years, I want to build a legacy for my children and grandchildren and set up a family trust, then that probably points towards something that's more like a variable product where you can actually buy the S&P 500 or similar types of indices. Insurance companies have, for the most part, gotten the memo that investors want the availability of low-cost indexed options. So you can do that through an insurance policy. And then, whereas if somebody says, you know what, I want something that's like this ironclad source of stability, even if equity markets are down more than 50%, like they were in the global financial crisis of 2008, I want a policy that just doesn't even flinch, right? The value just goes up 3 to 5% the next year, and that's fine. And that's available too, right? That's typically more of a whole life type of choice. So there's this whole range of interesting options available. And so some of it's figuring out, like, what do you want from this policy? And then in terms of figuring out if it's actually a good idea or not, there are a couple angles. One is whether the insurance policy is the best tool for the job. And this is where people get in trouble sometimes, where somebody who, say, was carrying a bunch of credit card debt, short coming out of residency, it's not always easy, right? And so they got sold this whole life policy. They were told that now that you're this like educated medical professional, this is what you got to do. And so they did it. You're not going to be well served by that insurance policy if at the same time you've got debt that's accruing at 23%, for example, right? So that's just not the right fit. Insurance policy is not the best tool for the job for that person. Whereas if you're talking about somebody who's a doctor in California and their tax burden is really high, and if they went out and they bought a bunch of high quality bonds like treasuries and financially stable companies' debt, they'd be paying a tax rate that's like over 50% by the time you're done with federal and state and the investment taxes. Then it's, wow, this is really interesting. Like, this person can set themselves up to spend and enjoy a lot more of their money in the future by using an insurance policy as part of their overall planning strategy. So those are the types of things we look for to tell us, like, is the client better off because of the insurance policy or not? And if the answer is no, we just tell you, right? That doesn't happen a ton, but it does happen. And when that's the case, we'll just level with you and say it. Yeah. So I think that starting with the facts and then being honest about what the facts are leads to the good outcomes.
And I love how you alluded to, because we talked about the risk mitigation, the insurance aspect, and then I was actually really fascinated with how you can use insurance vehicles either for retirement, wealth planning, tax planning strategy. And so it's a great segue because you've had a brilliant career in the financial services, working for Goldman Sachs. Because we talked about there's no one size fits all approach, but should most high net worth investors have some component of either whole life or variable life insurance as a component of their wealth planning or either tax mitigation strategy?
I would say the short answer is yes in most situations. Now, there's like a second level of nuance to it, which is that you also need to keep an eye on what's happening with underwriting. And underwriting is the process where an insurance company basically does some research on the applicant and decides if and at what price level they're willing to offer coverage to that person. And sometimes people have health factors or lifestyle factors, right? If you're really passionate about paragliding and skydiving, right, your options are going to be real different than if you're not, right? And so you have to layer in what's actually available to that individual before you run that analysis of, if I just put my money into a taxable brokerage instead, what would I expect? If I just put my money into a 401k that I've already maxed out the match, but then I'm wondering about the unmatched part, right? Like, how does that compare? These are all basically math problems, and we've built models that answer these math problems accurately. But I think it's important to do the analysis that way rather than just coming at it as everyone should have this, right? Because that's where you end up with those situations where it's like, hey, this doesn't make sense. And then the other thing I would just mention is that we're also, I think, appropriately careful about working with our clients to make sure that the policies they're stepping into are comfortable and sustainable for the long term. Because sometimes when you have a step function in income, but maybe life hasn't quite revealed itself to you yet, you just feel, oh man, I feel like the richest person on earth. And my dad sometimes describes this when he came out of the Air Force Academy. He went there for college And then he got his like first job in the Air Force, and he was getting paid like a very modest salary, but it was enough to allow him to buy a used car and a foosball table. And he cites that as the moment in life where he felt like he was just the richest guy on earth. It was incredible. And I think sometimes in the medical profession, right, like when you get that first like full compensation job, it could feel like, whoa, dang, like this is amazing. There's so much free cash flow here. Like my bank balances are growing up by a lot. This is incredible. What do I do? And that's great. And that's an awesome moment in time to reach out and have a conversation about this type of thing. But I think it's also important to think about if your hope in life is to also have 3 children, we want to make sure that we don't commit you to something today where if 5 or 7 years from now, those 3 children are here, you're like, oh my gosh, this is totally not sustainable. And it is possible to do that, right? Like it is possible to size things in a way where it works across a range of life scenarios, but that involves having a level of self-restraint that I think a number of folks in the industry like might not exercise. And so we try really hard to be cognizant of those factors and really set up our clients to have great options in the future and feel proud about what they did.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
This school year, let the Walmart app ace your kid's favorite subject, snack time. With Nature Valley Crunchy Granola and Danimals smoothies they'll actually wake up for. Craft Lunchables for a truly refined cafeteria palate, or Gatorade for when they take Capture the Flag a bit too seriously. Get all their on-the-go cravings delivered right to your door, just in time for that opening bell. New school year, all the snacks. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
And so I know a lot of listeners, they is what their appetite is. How can people go to you? Because it sounds like what you're describing is there's so many options, and to avoid mistakes is best to talk to somebody. So how can people contact you and book a call with you, ask questions, look for red flags, and connect with you?
Yeah, so we would love to talk with any of your listeners. In fact, we set up a special page just for listeners to this podcast, which is available at www.aboveboardfinancial.com/financial freedom. And so by going there, one of the options is to book a call, or if you just want to check out some quotes, that's available too. But would love to talk with people about these things. And I think that, you know, it's great to get started with learning a little bit about what might be possible. And then everyone is well positioned to make an informed decision, right? Like knowing what the options are for them.
Yeah, I love that. And for the audience and listeners, let's thank Wallis for coming on and showcasing her company, Above Board Financial, and all of her links will be in the show notes. Be sure to connect with her on LinkedIn and book a call with her, get your questions answered, do your research. And thanks so much for coming on to the show, and keep up the great work.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. It's been great. Hi, I'm Wallis. I'm the founder and CEO of Above Board Financial, and I had a great time being a guest on Dr. Lou's podcast, Financial Freedom. I went on the podcast because I was excited to have a chance to speak with Dr. Lou and offer some ideas for his audience to consider. It's a great way to reach high-earning, affluent professionals and with either medical backgrounds or who are still active in the medical profession. And it was just a lovely experience going on the show. I can't say enough good things about it.